Welcome, everyone, to another invigorating episode of Dr. Mercola's Cellular Wisdom, the show where we dive into the mysteries of the mind, body, and the modern health system. I'm Ethan, your faithful observer who enjoys picking apart life's curious details. And right beside me is my co-pilot in comedic commentary, Elara.
Thanks for that stirring introduction, Ethan. I like to think of us as two cosmic detectives on a mission to expose the hidden truths behind all things health-related, while indulging in the occasional sarcastic detour.
Indeed. Today's topic is something that's been called the disease of our modern age. We're talking about anxiety. It's one of the most common issues in mental health, yet it often gets treated like a one-size-fits-all condition. That means if you have any variety of jitters, your doctor might just hand you a medication and hope for the best.
Right. Because nothing says personalized care like a prescription that practically has a neon sign proclaiming, "Take this or else." On a serious note, though, anxiety's a big deal. Despite billions spent on treatments, rates keep going up. It's like we're investing in a bottomless pit of worry.
A pit of worry that's apparently quite profitable. Let's start by clarifying something important. Anxiety isn't one single monolithic thing. It can come in all shapes and sizes, from fear of spiders to social dread at dinner parties.
Exactly. Each type has its own set of triggers and underlying causes, yet many clinicians treat them all the same. They'll say, "Oh, you're anxious. Here's a bottle of pills. Next." So let's take a quick tour of these anxiety subtypes, shall we?
I'll serve as the museum guide. First, there's generalized anxiety disorder, known for those who worry about practically everything under the sun, like anticipating the apocalypse every time a cloud forms.
And let's not forget the muscle tension that usually accompanies GAD, because nothing screams, "I'm calm," like shoulders tensed up to your earlobes. The funny part is that GAD often responds to therapy, like cognitive behavioral therapy, but it's frequently made worse by certain medications like benzodiazepines. Meanwhile, what do people get? Benzodiazepines.
Next up is panic disorder. Picture sudden and intense panic attacks, accompanied by heart palpitations that convince you your ticker is about to pop right out of your chest. That affects about 2% to 3% of Americans each year.
Some folks find therapy like exposure and response prevention, ERP for short, super helpful for panic disorder. But once again, the medical vending machine often spits out those ever-present benzodiazepines. To be fair, sometimes they can help certain types of panic disorder, but the key is sometimes and certain types. Subtle distinctions often go missing in busy clinics.
Then we have specific phobias, ranging from fear of heights to fear of flying to fear of that suspicious green Jell-O at the cafeteria.
That one might be rational, though. You never know what's in that Jell-O. Anyway, specific phobias do well with therapy that exposes you gradually to the scary thing, like climbing one rung on a ladder at a time or seeing a spider from a safe distance before you move in any closer.
Some folks are also given benzodiazepines, short term for severe phobic reactions. But if you're noticing a pattern, it's that the same pill is frequently doled out for everything from fear of clowns to fear of open spaces. Which brings us to agoraphobia, the panic-inducing fear of situations where escape might be complicated. Therapy helps, benzodiazepines, not so much.
Then there's social anxiety disorder, where you're terrified of people judging you, making you dread parties or any social interaction. I guess that means you and I don't have it, considering we willingly come on a podcast to be judged by the entire planet.
You and I may have many issues, Elara, but apparently social anxiety isn't one. Low-dose beta blockers can help with the physical side of social anxiety, like a racing heart. But again, you won't always hear that from your time-strapped doctor. By the way, speaking of time-strapped, that leads us right into one major problem with modern psychiatry. There's not much time spent with actual patients.
Yes, the classic 15-minute appointment. It's like speed dating, but with your mental health. During those precious minutes, doctors often can't explore possible causes of your anxiety or discuss therapy. Instead, you leave with a scribbled prescription and maybe a half-hearted grin. Then you're back in your car, coping with side effects and the underlying issues that remain unresolved.
This is also where misdiagnosis runs rampant. Real root causes get overlooked. So a medication that might help one type of anxiety could make another type worse. And that's especially relevant for depression, which often intertwines with anxiety.
The same person can have multiple flavors of anxiety swirling around simultaneously, too. So if you pile one medication on top of another, you'll need a forklift to carry all those pills around, and you still might not get to the actual source of the anxiety.
Let's talk about some of those root causes. We're dealing with mental, physical, metabolic, and lifestyle factors that can all trigger anxiety. Mentally, there's this overthinking epidemic. People stuck in a hamster wheel of worry, fueled by the constant barrage of doom-laden news and social media posts.
Oh, social media. Isn't it fun how 1 second you're looking at pictures of your friend's vacation, and the next you're bombarded with panic-inducing headlines about the state of the world? It's a perfect recipe for anxiety. Then we have inadequate emotional coping skills, which means people never learn how to handle life's stressors without pharmaceuticals, alcohol, or random impulse buys.
Another factor is anxiety contagion. Hang around highly anxious people, and you might catch it like a cold. Now, let's pivot to the physical side of things. Hormonal imbalances, like thyroid or progesterone issues, can create all sorts of havoc, including anxiety. Low blood sugar is another one. It triggers fight or flight responses that can masquerade as panic attacks.
Which is an interesting twist. If you're not paying attention, you might think you're having an emotional crisis when it's actually your blood sugar tanking. There are also more subtle influences, like exposure to electromagnetic fields. Some people find their anxiety drastically improves when they're away from high Wi-Fi environments.
Blue light from all our screens can also ramp up nervous system distress, especially at night. Meanwhile, everything from head injuries to heart conditions can present as unexplained anxiety. Yet, how often do we see doctors systematically checking these triggers before they whip out that prescription pad?
Not nearly often enough. If it's a busy day, you'll get a quick scan of your symptoms, and that's about it. Another angle is metabolic causes. There are patterns in the biochemistry of anxiety and depression. People can be undermethylators or overmethylators, for instance, which influences how they respond to certain medications and supplements.
Right, some folks are helped by SSRIs, while others spiral into worse conditions on those drugs. But if your practitioner never looks at your particular metabolic type, you could end up on a medication that's completely wrong for you. Now let's address lifestyle. Many who struggle with anxiety have stagnant routines, sitting at desks all day glued to screens, no time outdoors. That's why exercise, something as simple as daily walks, often trumps medication for mild to moderate anxiety. And then we have the big one, benzodiazepines. They're like a nuclear option for anxiety. They can provide short-term relief for certain panic disorders or intense phobias, but they also come with a list of downsides long enough to fill a medical textbook.
Benzodiazepines are notorious for their addictive potential. Once you're on them, you might find it harder to break up with them than to break up with an actual human. Some have a short half-life and create a rush of euphoria. When that euphoria fades, people often feel horrible, so they keep taking more.
And then you have that phenomenon of tolerance, where you need higher and higher doses to achieve the same effect. Before you know it, you're more stuck than a cat in a tree. Patients also face issues with inconsistent generic versions. You change to a new brand, and suddenly the dose feels off, which can trigger withdrawal symptoms.
It's wild. All of this would be less of a problem if the medical community approached anxiety in a stepwise manner. Start with the least invasive therapy, like CBT or any other time-intensive approach proven to work, and only then, if absolutely needed, introduce medication. But that's not how the current system usually operates.
The rushed environment doesn't help. Psychiatrists can't always provide the kind of thorough, empathetic interaction patients need. And so, in many cases, people just end up on a perpetual medication plan. It's reminiscent of a hamster wheel, lots of spinning, no exit sign.
The entire thing is amplified by the fact that healthcare systems often have backward incentives. Profits can come from endless prescriptions rather than meaningful solutions. Meanwhile, the root problems, lifestyle, environment, emotional coping, or a combination, stay nicely tucked under the rug.
Indeed. And that's part of why anxiety, like other chronic conditions, continues to surge. The system is set up to perpetuate, not to resolve.
Now, I do think there's a silver lining. There's a growing awareness that we can't keep throwing the same treatments at anxiety and expect miraculous outcomes. People are discovering there are therapies and lifestyle tweaks that tackle anxiety's deeper layers.
Absolutely. Whether it's checking your thyroid, adopting a daily walk, limiting screen exposure in the evenings, practicing some form of grounding to discharge stress, or exploring your own biochemistry with an informed practitioner, these steps can be huge. They're not quick fixes, but they also don't leave you stuck in a never-ending prescription loop.
We should emphasize that real solutions require actual effort. It can be uncomfortable because you might have to reflect on your mental habits, or your relationships, or even your job. In the big picture, though, that's more sustainable than being dependent on a bottle of pills that may come with a list of side effects.
And let's not forget therapy. Forms like cognitive behavioral therapy or exposure and response prevention have strong track records. People often shy away because therapy can be time-consuming or emotionally challenging. But guess what else is time-consuming and emotionally challenging? Being perpetually anxious.
Preach, Ethan. You'd think we'd be quicker to choose the path that actually gives us better life skills in the long run. But human nature's a complicated beast. Some folks do try therapy after they've already been on a medication merry-go-round. Then they discover, oh wait, this addresses my underlying fear. Who would have thought?
It's a revelation, and it's a sign that real healing doesn't have to be endless. Let's face it. If the root cause of your anxiety is fixable, be it blood sugar swings, a toxic work environment, or unprocessed trauma, then focusing on that makes a lot more sense than using a nuclear option to zap the symptoms.
Exactly. Sometimes you can't avoid medication. There are severe cases where short-term benzodiazepines might be needed, or SSRIs might help one specific anxiety type. But the way it stands now, we're over-relying on them. It's turning into a hamster wheel of sedation and dependency rather than a journey toward genuine resilience.
So we can sum it up. Anxiety rates keep rising because we're hardly ever addressing the real causes. We have a rushed healthcare system, financial incentives that favor prolonged treatment, and a cultural tendency to look for quick fixes.
Yet, we do see a glimmer of hope. We're hearing more voices that question the status quo. People are turning to integrative approaches, focusing on nutrition, exercise, and therapies that target both mind and body. They're noticing results. That's a huge step in the right direction.
Yes, a step away from feeding the anxiety industry and toward real health. Maybe we'll see a shift as more folks demand better care. At the end of the day, the reason we have this show is to inform people about the nuance behind these conditions so they can make conscious choices.
Our hope is that by shining a light on these truths, we inspire listeners to look deeper. Whether you're dealing with GAD, panic disorder, or just a vague feeling of dread, there are paths that go beyond quick-fix medications. It might require detective work, but that's better than being forever stuck in a loop.
Indeed it is. So, to everyone tuning in, remember that anxiety is more than just a single label. If you want lasting solutions, you need to know which flavor of anxiety you're dealing with and what's fueling it: mental, physical, metabolic, or lifestyle. Or maybe all of the above.
And with that, we wrap up another enlightening discussion on Dr. Mercola's cellular wisdom. I'm Alara, reminding you that your mind and body are on the same team, so it might help to let them collaborate instead of letting them fight it out.
And I'm Ethan, thanking you for joining us on this journey into the complexities of anxiety. Until next time, keep exploring the deeper causes behind your health concerns, and don't settle for anything less than a thorough, thoughtful approach.
Stay curious, folks.
And remember, a dash of humor and a dose of knowledge never hurt anyone, unless, of course, you have a crippling fear of puns, in which case, maybe start with a milder comedic therapy.
Oh, you're never mild. You're just well-timed. Goodbye, everyone.